Doug and Renee Benefield lived in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Together, they had a daughter named Eva. In December of 2015, Renee died from an undiagnosed heart ailment, a difficult tragedy for her teenage daughter. Then, just 9 months later, Doug was married again, this time to a 24-year-old woman. Her name, Ashley Byers, a swimsuit model and ballerina. It was a quick romance as they got married just 13 days after meeting. They lived in Charleston, South Carolina. Doug was a successful consultant working in technologies and also working with the government. But Ashley had a dream of opening a ballet company in Charleston. Doug supported that effort and they started to put it together. But in the midst of it, Ashley got pregnant. From there, the relationship soured, and Ashley went to Bradenton, Florida to live with her mother. The couple became entwined in a bitter custody battle for the baby. Ashley accused Doug of trying to poison her, something the family court judge did not believe. Then, just before a big date in family court, Doug was at Ashley's house with a U-Haul loading up items from inside the house for a big move. While Ashley's mother and daughter were at a nearby park, something happened between the two, and Ashley shot and killed Doug. She's been charged with murder but is claiming self-defense. And now, as she prepares for her trial here on Court TV, we are live from Manatee County, returning to the scene as we get ready for the Black Swan murder trial.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Big trial starting up next week right here on your front row seat to justice involving Ashley Benefield. But I want to start here tonight and talk about marriages and divorce. I mean, about half, maybe 50% of marriages end up in divorce. So it's not uncommon. It's way too common, as a matter of fact. And in a lot of these relationships, there are children involved and there are custody battles. This is not extraordinary. This is extremely ordinary. Unfortunately, when things end in death, you got to take a second look at it and try to figure out what the connection is in all of this. So in this case, it's a little different because the battle and the courtroom battle really began before the child was born. They're litigating before birth about the child that's going to be born. That's a little unusual, okay? I get it. Sometimes, you know, things happen. But this is not the common way things happen. That while you're expecting this child, you've reversed a vasectomy, and now things are split up and you're litigating so you can see your child and have some form of shared custody. That's what was happening here. So a lot of unusual moments here before we even get to the shooting. So this is not how things normally go in a divorce and custody battle. This one begins way early. And the litigation is continuing after the shooting. They're still litigating at the time of the shooting. Like the litigation began before the child was born and was continuing throughout, had not totally resolved itself, but then it was resolved when Doug Benefield was shot by Ashley Benefield. So what was happening in family court is absolutely connected to this trial. You can't separate the two. They are one and the same. The problem is they're still litigating this divorce, but at the time of the murder, Doug was at her house helping pack up a U-Haul. Like, why was Doug there? Why is he at the house packing up boxes with Ashley? Like they're moving together, but they're still litigating this divorce and this custody? What? This is so confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And one of the reasons it doesn't make a lot of sense is because there are two different versions of what is going on here and what the reality is. But we're going to try to get to the bottom of it. That's what we do, and that's what that trial will ultimately be about. But let's begin by going down to Florida. Court TV producer Cody Thomas joining us live from outside the courthouse where the criminal trial will take place. Cody, great to see you. Now, I know you were all over Bradenton and about today looking at different spots related to this case and to this investigation. Let's start first with the neighborhood, right? The scene of the crime is in a neighborhood. That's where Doug is. He wasn't living there. But what did you find out about that neighborhood as you were traveling around today?
So, Vinnie, one of the first things I noticed about that neighborhood was that it was very securely gated. And from what I could see, it was only one entrance and one exit. And going in those gates, only one car at a time. And it was heavily flooded with security cameras, so even a security camera on the visitor call box. So I imagine it would be hard for anyone to try to sneak in, whether by car or on foot by the sidewalk that was going in front of it. So super secure place, kind of similar to that same community we visited in Orlando where Madeline Soto and her family lived as well.
Okay, so to get in there, basically you've got to be invited, right? You've got to know somebody, they've got to punch you in, you punch in a code. You talk to the security guard, they're going to lift the gate, and they're going to get you in. So that night, Doug is there. They're loading up this U-Haul truck. What did you learn today about Doug and Ashley's situation? It seems very complicated from the outside because they're litigating, but they're together, but they don't live together, but he's helping her move. What exactly did you find out today?
Well, actually today, Vinnie, I talked to Doug Benefield's cousin, Tommy Benefield, and of course, we've heard about that big Maryland move that Ashley was supposed to make to get farther away from Doug during this bitter child custody battle. But what Tommy told me today was that it was actually supposed to be Doug and Ashley, and even Ashley's mother moving with him to Maryland, which is why he was there that day helping pack stuff up with them. Take a listen.
She got pregnant. She had morning sickness, and that's its own, iceberg of a story anyway. But she claims to Doug at the time and to me that she's moving down because her mother can take better care of her while Doug's traveling for business and so busy. That's the claim. Several months later, the night of the ballet debut, the launch of the ballet, she and her mother sneak back in the house, take her things, give a note that's in court documents saying, hey, leave me alone. And that's when the separation occurs informally.
Gotcha.
So for months, he drove 8 hours down there, weekends, 8 to 12 hours, depending on where he was. Most weekends, certainly half the weekends in those first 3 months while they're separated, but he still believes they're going to get back together after after her pregnancy, the birth of the child, that stuff. Doug and Ashley were not only reconciling, they went through mediation the week before the killing, and came into the mediation. It lasted 12 minutes because they told their attorneys and they told the mediator, we're getting back together we're going to withdraw the divorce petition and we're moving to Maryland together. That's what he believed up until Sunday at noon of the killing. The day of the murder, the killing, they approved him to come to the house because he's moving her stuff to Maryland the next day.
And Vinnie, Tommy even told me today that Doug already had a job set up that he was supposed to begin about a week to 10 days after the date that he was shot and killed. So I imagine once he found out that they did not want to live with him anymore on that Maryland move, there's probably some strife that took place in that household.
Strange circumstances. All right, Cody, stand by. I want to bring in our think tank joining us tonight, live in studio, criminal defense attorney, entertainment attorney, and former assistant DA in Atlanta, Daryl Cohn is with us. Also joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney and Emory University law professor, Molly Palmer. And finally, criminal defense attorney, the man behind the glasses, Josh Schiffer, is with us as well. All right, initial reaction to what's happening here.
It's a fairy tale, except it turned in from a fairy tale to a fairy tragedy. PTSD.
What's a fairy tragedy? Wait a minute.
It's brand new. It's from Hollywood.
Daryl's changing the paradigm for childhood now. You no longer you have fairy tales, fairy tragedy. Kids, come on, gather around.
So
it's a divorce. So let's just say some of us might have some experience in that department.
Okay.
And
Not
you
me.
you can't predict what's going on at any one moment when there is a really emotional and hard divorce. People's emotions swing back and forth. I've seen people, we all laughed when they talked about the 12-minute mediation, because we've all been there and listened to clients turn around at the last minute and completely change what they've been telling you the entire time due to the pulls of the heartstrings.
So do you think that they were really both wanting to get back together? And
I think it was a definite maybe. I think
No.
from one moment to another, they, she, he, her, they had no clue. It was a blender.
Well, a blender. I do think that it's not even just looking at the divorce, which obviously was tumultuous and unpredictable. Let's look at the marriage. Let's look at the relationship before they even get into this custody battle and these contentious proceedings in front of the family court. They were saying they loved each other within 2 days. They went on international vacations within 6 days. They were married within what, 2 weeks?
13 days.
Lucky
13
days.
Lucky 13. That's all of that should be considered as well. Not just, oh, now we have 12 minutes and they've reconciled. That's how their timeline was. It's chaotic. It's unpredictable. It's insane.
All right, let me throw something else in the mix here. This is a transcript from her bond hearing, okay? She has a bond hearing. She's out on bond. She's going to walk in and out of the courthouse during the trial. And her family law attorney is on the stand. This is the testimony. Faith Brown, her family law attorney. Did you develop a plan to secure her safety? Yes, I did. I actually rented a car, a van specifically. I had it set up so that she would come to my office under the pretense that she was there to sign off to have the injunction dropped. And we were going to move her at that point in the car that I had rented. Dr. Russell secured her a hotel room in St. Petersburg that was actually listed under her husband's name as well as mine, so that Ashley would not be able to be located. The goal was for her to be there until the hearing on that upcoming, I believe it was Wednesday, for the injunction. And the shooting happened on a Saturday, is that right? It happened on Sunday night, and we were moving her on Monday. What do you think of that? I mean, so from her perspective, she's in danger. Her lawyers are secretly moving her out. Why is she inviting him beyond the secured gate to help load up a U-Haul? I don't understand this.
I don't think there's anything to understand. I think it's hocus pocus. And
By
whatever.
whom?
By her. I think she is setting this up so that she is so fearful of him, and yes, I'm going to let him come in and help move out the furniture, but I'm going to move him out.
But that's total speculation, my friend.
Of course it is.
Like, you've got to admit, there's no one that can tell you what was going on between these two accurately in the time immediately before and immediately after the shooting, because they told different stories to everyone.
Well, she has never given a statement to police.
I know.
Yes.
And never spoken once. She
Never.
must have like Molly Palmer in her ear.
And
Don't say, she
Don't
wouldn't even go on the
say
911 call.
A word, I know. Well, I think, you know, that testimony from her attorney at the bond hearing, I think is very compelling. And I'm curious if that attorney will testify at trial about reasonable fear. I do think also that attorney is setting themselves up for a cross-examination that's like, you're her advocate, you're being paid by her. There is some level of bias there. But I do think that that is pretty compelling testimony, and we haven't heard any from Ashley Benefield herself.
And have any of your clients ever lied to you, Molly Palmer?
Never.
Saying anything about that on television.
Well, we've never had a
No
client.
comment.
Now, one thing the judge has said, the judge does not want to make this into a family law trial. Is there any way that it doesn't play out that way? Because that's the whole story here, is what's going on in the divorce and the custody battle.
Why was he killed? Why did she find it necessary to shoot him?
Which do you find more compelling here? Does it seem like she's actually in fear if she's there packing alone and allows her mother to leave, so she's there with him by herself?
Oh, I think she was so fearful that she had to have a weapon in her hand.
Well, she always had a weapon.
She always
in
had
her
hand, not in her
They're
bra.
both big Second Amendment folks, so they both have weapons.
It's not the fact that she had a weapon, it's that she had a weapon in her hand, not in her bra, in her hand. And she was so fearful that she didn't want her mother to see any of the trauma that was going on.
But Vinnie, the judge doesn't have what you're talking about on their menu. They don't get to choose to not make this basically a family law case with a death involved, because that's what it is. You can't differentiate or remove the family law, which is one of the most emotional things any client will ever go through.
Oh, yeah.
From the fact that there is then a criminal case concurrent. They are inextricably linked.
Now, the fact that we haven't heard her story yet, and we'll hear it for the first time in the courtroom, or will we? Is there some way that she can, because the defense is sort of a hybrid, is what I'm hearing in the courtroom, right? It's a little bit of a lot of self-defense, and a little bit of battered syndrome, what was happening at the moment, what had been happening throughout the relationship. Is there a way to do that without putting her on the stand, Molly?
I think she has to testify. That's my feeling. And what shocks me is that she did not take the stand in the stand your ground hearing. That is shocking. So that's weird, right? To any lawyer who is going to go forward with a stand your ground type of defense at trial, you have this opportunity for this initial hearing, and you generally put your client up. You prep them, but that's the whole point, right? We need to know what they felt. Were they in reasonable fear? The fact that they didn't do that makes me wonder if there is some sort of issue.
If there's no witness to the shooting, who does it help more here, prosecution or defense?
If she doesn't testify?
No,
or
no,
if
I'm saying there's no witness to the shooting.
There's no witness.
It becomes really difficult because, remember, when you choose an affirmative defense, that requires the defendant now has a burden. They have to prove something else that is different. It's the only way you really get a burden in criminal from, you steal it from the state. But now they have an obligation. And if she doesn't testify, I just don't see how anybody's going to absolve her of responsibility.
I do. You make the state of Florida prove the case. Make the state attorney's office prove the case. You wait and see which avenue they go down, which highway they go down, or which gated community they come into. And based upon that, then you start framing your defense.
All right, they're staying with us. When we come back, we'll go back down to Braden in Florida with Cody Thomas and talk about whether or not Doug was stalking Ashley. Plus, coming up next hour.
A deadly custody battle in Florida. Shanna Gardner accused of leading a murder-for-hire plot to kill her ex, the father of her twins. Was she motivated by a strange clause in her trust fund? We investigate.
Did a customs agent commit cold-blooded murder?
Marsha Thompson is accused of fatally shooting her husband as he's lying on a couch.
She's claiming self-defense, alleging that Terry Thompson repeatedly threatened to kill her.
So what really happened inside this home?
Now, a jury will decide the fate of this law enforcement officer.
And Court TV will bring it all to you.
The Abused Wife or Murderer Trial. Weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
And you were married how long after you first met?
About 13 days later.
Right. And what's your age?
26.
And how old is your husband?
I believe he's 56.
Initially, there was obviously chemistry. We were just going to start really kind of focusing on the campaign work. And that was sort of the driving force for her coming up to Charleston. Besides, I think we wanted to see each other. But once she got up, it just evolved very fast. And initially, it was let's get engaged and hide it just so we don't have to date. And she'll come back to Florida, and then it was like, are you think what I'm thinking? And let's get married and hide it. Again, stupid for both of us, but we did it.
Married within 13 days. I'm sure there are stories out there of people who met under similar timelines and had great marriages. This was not one of them. This ended as bad as it can end, with one person dead and the other one on trial for murder. Now, as they're breaking up and litigating, and she moves to Florida and Doug starts going down to Florida and all of that, there are allegations by Ashley that Doug is obsessed and stalking her, and she feels like she's in fear of Doug at this point. I want to read for you. This is from the Manatee County Sheriff's Office. My neighbor, Mary Ann Croft, texted me that she just confronted a man in the backyard. This was at approximately 8:30 p.m. After text messages back and forth, we called her, and she expressed concerns that the man may have been my soon-to-be ex, Doug Benefield. This adds to my concerns that he is stalking me. I have come home to see Doug on the floor in front of my house. Doug admits to following me to work and hiding in the parking lot, taking pictures and videos. Doug admits to putting a secret tracker on my car. So this could be a big part of the case, is what is going on here? Is there danger? Is Ashley Benefield being stalked by someone who is now obsessed and won't let go and has become a danger? Let's go back to Court TV producer Cody Thomas, who's been working this case down in Bradenton, Florida for us, where it's all happening. Now, you spoke again to Tommy Benefield, who very close cousin of Doug. What did he have to say about the stalking allegations?
Well, Vinnie, as you just read, of course, Ashley Benefield and her defense are accusing Doug of all of those things, putting trackers on her car, standing outside of her house, following her to work. But when I spoke to Tommy about those allegations today, Tommy says he never knew that to be in Doug's character. Take a listen.
I don't know if that was Doug. I asked him about that later, and he said he didn't do it, and I've never known him to be a liar. The first time that he gets visitation on a visitation weekend with the daughter, all the previous times after it was forced, she would say, "Oh, let's go together to dinner. Let's go be with her together. You know, she needs to see us together." She would never leave him alone with the child. They go to an event. They go to a handoff, and it's in public. And at the time, I can't remember if this was the police station or it was the hospital, but cameras and everything. She walks in, tosses the kid in the bag. She has an engagement ring on her hand, and she shows it to him. And Doug finds out with a private investigator she's engaged to be married. And I can give you the guy's name. I can give you the LLC they formed. You would have every reason to suspect your estranged wife, that you might want to know what she's doing when she says she's getting back together with you, but she's engaged to another man.
Wow.
So I give him some grace on wondering where his kid is, wondering where she's going, because he had to hire a private investigator eventually to find her. So I can't disprove it, but he's got every reason to be very, very suspicious.
Vinnie, you just heard right there, Doug was under the impression that Ashley was hiding quite a big secret from him. But even amidst all of that, Tommy reiterated to me that he always believed and still believes that Doug was a good man.
You know, everyone's jaw just dropped as you were playing that. That's an allegation that she is engaged to someone else while telling Doug, her estranged husband, father of her child, that they are going to get back together. We've seen her at court, right? As we see her, I don't see her with a husband or with a fiancé. It doesn't appear that way. She seems to be walking in and out by herself. But I guess we'll learn more about this during the trial, hopefully. Now, the other part of this, when you talk about an allegation of stalking, right? He was living in South Carolina. She moves with her mother down in Bradenton. But he ends up down in Florida. Is he in her neighborhood? What was his living situation when he was in Florida during all of this?
Well, Tommy did inform me today that he did not live in that gated community with Ashley or her mother, but he wasn't too far away, and I actually visited where he lived today as well. Let's take a look. This is that Central Park at Lakewood Ranch community where Ashley Benefield lived with her mother when she moved from Charleston, South Carolina to Bradenton, Florida when she got pregnant with her and Doug Benefield's daughter. It's also where the shooting occurred, where Doug Benefield ultimately passed away. Now, as we're seeing the front of this, it's a gated community. It looks like I can see a bunch of security cameras out front, and as you see these cars coming in right here, one car in, one car out, a very secure space. And it only looks like there's one entrance and one exit. So we know a major component of this case are those stalking allegations that Ashley had towards Doug. Now, that begs the question, how could you stalk someone who lives inside a gated community that you don't have access to? And more importantly, where did Doug Benefield actually live if those allegations are true? So this is what it would look like pulling up to this Lakewood Ranch community where Ashley Benefield lived. Is also where the incident between her and Doug Benefield went down. And as you can see, it's heavily gated, and this looks like the only way in and the only way out. And there's security cameras also watching all cars entering and exiting. And there's also a security camera right here on this call box. So let's see what it says when we get here. It says push to call, and a guard will be with you shortly, which means there's only one of two ways for you to enter this place. One, if you live here, or two, if you know someone that lives here and they give you permission to enter. So one of the main questions in this case was, where was Doug Benefield actually living when he moved from Charleston down here to Bradenton, Florida? Well, the answer, according to court documents obtained by us here at Court TV, was this apartment complex just over a mile from that community where Ashley Benefield was living with her mother. Again, this is where Doug Benefield lived when he moved from Charleston down here to Bradenton in the interest of trying to see his newborn daughter during that custody battle he had between him and Ashley Benefield. And Vinnie, you saw right there where Doug lived in that apartment complex. That was no more than a 3-minute drive from that gated community where Ashley and her mother lived.
So it seems if you're going to stalk someone inside that community, maybe you got to sneak in on foot.
Right, but the thing is, when we were outside that gate, one car in, one car out. You know, sometimes you go to apartment complexes and you see cars kind of tailing others in, zooming up right behind them just to fit in maybe 2 or 3 cars at a time. But that was not the case here. The gate came down immediately, and there were no access gates to enter on foot either from the sidewalk that went in front. So it's up in the air. The allegations are there, but the court will have to decide if those are true.
Absolutely. Another big issue in this case. Stay where you are, Carter. Let's bring back in our think tank, Daryl Cohen, Molly Palmer, Josh Schiffer. What do you think of the stalking allegation here?
I mean, I think both of them have intense personalities. Again, if you have an individual on either side who's going to be married within 13 days, there is a certain level of emotional intensity that we're dealing with. And I think what's going to be interesting at trial is we're going to see possibly evidence of these like notes they wrote to each other when they were trying to reconcile. And she was like, I'm not going to come back to you unless you change your behavior. And I think he does acknowledge in writing, I won't shoot the ceiling again. I won't be so abusive. So there is some evidence, I think, that he was being aggressive, that he was being too intense, that she called him out on it, and that he acknowledged and apologized. So I think it's plausible. Anything's plausible with a case with facts like these.
You don't need to be inside of the gated community to stalk. I'm not saying he did. I'm not saying he didn't. He could have been hanging out and waiting until she, with her mom, their child, drove out and could have followed her everywhere. So yes, it's easier to stalk if you can get to the residence, but if you can't, that doesn't exclude him from being a stalker.
So Josh, I want you to put these two things together though. The allegations of stalking, but the reconciliation.
That's the whole issue. And anybody that's worked on TPOs, anybody that's worked in these high intensity.
What's a TPO?
Protective order.
Oh.
Any of these very high intensity, really emotional, people change their minds constantly. What is the story right now is different in 15 minutes. And I've seen people come into my office, I'm gonna go take out an order. And then a day later, I can't believe
okay, that's what they say.
That.
But I want to get to the truth and what you think. Is it possible that he could be stalking her one moment, in another moment they're actually reconciling?
Yes.
Or is the behavior just being described differently?
It's both. It's all. It's the combination. Not because it's how people are interpreting what's being given to them. She can be duplicitous to him, to the lawyers, to her family. She can tell all the stories she wants, and then those stories can change. So can he.
How about this now? The other thing that we got thrown into the mix here, that he's wondering. She wants to reconcile, but she has a fiance. Like, and so is it stalking or is it investigation?
Why are they mutually exclusive? They're not. He may have been investigating her to see why she has another fiance, oftentimes called a final say. So we don't know. Was he stalking her? Was he actually anticipating that the two of them would get back together and the fairy tale would remain intact or come back together? Who knows? We'll never know.
We're going to find out at trial.
I need my prop boombox so I can stand out of the window, because that's stalking. Stalking's this giant, broad set of behaviors. Anything can be considered stalking when you contextualize it properly, and it's all up to that victim or claimant.
All right,
to
how
say,
about putting it all together now? The allegations of the stalking, the setup, the second fiance, inviting him in to help move, going to the U-Haul together to rent the U-Haul. How does that all play with the fact that she was then planning this escape? Like, to me, I can't connect all of this.
I think it's just so tumultuous, right? And I think at trial, what you have to do is paint a picture of absolute chaos in the relationship at all times, highs and lows. Because remember, with second-degree murder in Florida law, it's not about premeditation. It's that second. So you can forget about how one day they were on, one day they were off, one day she was in love, the other day she has a different fiance. I don't know. The point is, seconds before those shots were fired, was she in reasonable fear of her own death?
And the volatility can change in a heartbeat.
All right, stay where you are. When we come back, did Ashley Benefield have a motive to murder? We'll talk about that next.
The state has presented a vast motive to get this man out of her life so she can have this child to herself. She's manipulative. She is telling him one thing, telling everyone else something else. And this defendant knew that she, 3 days after the shooting, had to be in front of the same judge that was not favorable to her. And this report was going to come out, and it was going to blow her story out of the water, and it was going to say that she was not planning to reconcile with Doug. And quite frankly, the fear of what the judge would do at that point was enough.
The motive. There was this court date that was just looming. It was right there, and what would be revealed would be a problem for Ashley Benefield and be a problem for her and the custody of her child, and she wanted the child all to herself. That's what prosecutors are talking about here. Let's bring back in Cody Thomas, who is still with us down in Bradenton, Florida. So let's talk about the day and what was going on around the day of the shooting, because I think that the timeline of events is very significant here.
Well, Vinny, this is where it gets interesting, so follow me here. After speaking with Tommy today, he says that around that time the shooting occurred, both Doug and Ashley were petitioning to have their divorce case thrown out. And of course, we know that the judge didn't do it right away. She wanted to wait on the results of the psych evaluation that came out 3 days after Doug was shot and killed. But it was also around that time when Ashley caught wind that she might be taking a major loss in that bitter child custody battle. Take a listen to this.
They were going to petition the family court judge to dismiss the divorce case. That was in mediation the week before the killing. The attorneys notified the judge of that, and the judge wouldn't dismiss it because she said, and Doug talked to me about this, he wanted to get it dismissed so they could go on and he could move. They had already packed out a pod. You know what a pod is? One of the storage things you can move.
Yep.
Alicia and Ashley had already moved a bunch of stuff in a pod.
Alicia is Ashley's mother.
Ashley's mother.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's Alicia, Ashley, and the daughter living together in Alicia's rental home. On Thursday, they have the mediation, and they announce, hey, we're getting back together. We're going to withdraw the divorce petition.
Gotcha.
That's Thursday. On Friday, the judge calls both attorneys and says, I appreciate the fact that they want to withdraw, but she tells the attorneys, I will not let Doug withdraw the divorce petition until he reads, and so the judge more or less said, I will read the state psychologist report, Dr. Broder's report, in court next Wednesday, and if he still thinks he should reconcile, I'll dismiss the case. That's on Friday. Also on Friday, both attorneys, and this is critical to the timing of the killing. On Friday, both attorneys are notified that the judge is questioning primary custody with Ashley.
So, Vinnie, motive for murder? That's up to the court to decide, but I'm sure we will have our answer very shortly once this trial begins on Monday.
Wow. Extremely layered, complicated, but that sort of makes sense when you play it out that way. Cody Thomas are on the case tonight down in Bradenton. We will speak with you tomorrow on another story. Thanks so much, Cody. Let's bring back in our think tank Daryl Cohen, Molly Palmer, Josh Schiffer. What about the judge was questioning primary custody? There's something in that evaluation that was going to be read during the week, and that day never comes.
Well, that day never came because Ashley made sure it didn't arrive. But so what the judge is not saying, I'm not going to allow you to dismiss it. The judge is saying, hang on a minute, read this report. Then you make your decision. So there's something in that report that's not going to be beneficial.
The allegation of what may be in that report is that she is telling the evaluator that she doesn't want to get back with Doug. That she's gonna, she wants to go somewhere else and just leave.
Do we know who had full access to this report? Because really, lots of these reports and things that are traded or not traded, someone can have information, make decisions without that other person being aware or involved. It would obviously change the tact. If suddenly,
but Ashley's going to know what she told the evaluator.
Yeah, but you don't know how that's going to get interpreted by the evaluator. People try to cook evaluations somewhat regularly. The evaluations are built to highlight when people are trying to malinger or manipulate the psychological evaluation. There's a big red flag right there. So depending on who knew what when, that's the real question, because it would obviously affect her primary custody argument. You start talking about taking away primary custody, that's when people...
That's when we get to motive. That's Friday.
Right.
The shooting is on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't think that, I mean, oh, she has a court date she doesn't want to go to. You know, oh, she doesn't want this part of the report read. Oh, the divorce won't be dismissed. That's a bit of a stretch. I do think that there is something about that maternal instinct that when it comes down to a fear of losing custody to somebody that you feel so strongly about, that I think is sufficient for a motive.
This case turned out to be predictably unpredictable because it was a blender. Molly has pointed it out. Emotions here, emotions there. I love you, I hate you. There's a song, I love you, hate you. This was life, love you, hate you. And it could very well be that she set this up because she wanted to get remarried, but not to Doug.
Let me ask you now. We're getting ready for a trial that's going to begin on Monday. Is this a motive that could be sold to a jury? Does it sound like, okay, yeah, all right, we get it. Now we understand why she would do this.
It depends on how well the state attorney's office is able to show to the jury that he, Doug, was vicious, was stalking her, and was scary. He fired at the ceiling. He did all of these things. If they can show how frightening he was to her, they may very well have a great case to defend Ashley as PTSD, the old battered woman syndrome.
It's never just motive, right? Motive is, you know, something that jurors like to consider. The mental state is obviously part of this case, what led to the shooting seconds before, but it's also the act. And I think what's going to be important...
But isn't motive everything here?
No.
Because it's, she's either motivated by self-preservation or she's motivated by, I got to take him out.
I think what's going to be most important is going to be the ballistics description, the quantity of shots, the type of bullets, the type of gun, and how he was facing. That is what's going to either be a win or a loss for Ashley Benefield.
There's no way to pin down the emotions for any of these people beyond a reasonable doubt at any one time. Because like you're saying, there's justification for all kinds of volatility. Who knew what, when, where, kids involved, custody. The physical evidence don't lie.
Yeah,
and
but it does.
But we've seen the interpretations of crime scenes. We've seen both good state and good defense witnesses come up and pick that physical evidence apart. But I tend to agree with Molly. That's something a jury can get confidence in. The state needs to concentrate on that if they want to carry their burden.
If they can show that he was a bad guy or she is a bad person, then they've got a conviction if she is a bad person. If they show he's a bad guy and she was just doing this because she was so scared.
Well, how does the jury figure out who's good and who's bad here?
Well, that's the question. Yeah. Is she going to testify, right? That's the final piece that has me, you know, I'm fascinated by this case for so many reasons, and one of which is that we have not heard from her, right? So that is a huge part of this trial.
And that's the tricky defense lawyer thinking, because what do you do by keeping her completely silent? The state does not know what to build in advance of her statement.
How about this, though? There was a family court case, and she testified.
Yes.
He testified. Judge didn't believe her at all. Does that play into the mix for what the defense is talking about as they prepare for this trial?
Of course it does. And there's part of it, how she is dressed, what her body language is, what her facial expressions are, how she interacts with her lawyer, how her face responds to the testimony of the state attorney's witnesses. All of those things make a difference.